What's going on, guys, gals, and non-binary pals? Welcome to the Nintendo Select Podcast, a weekly Nintendo Switch retrospective and nostalgia podcast where we talk about our favorite Switch memories. Hosted by me, Charlie Wacholz.
And me, Tucker Hazell.
This week, we're looking back at the Switch's legendary launch year. We'll be going through the games that came to Switch in 2017 with our friend AndresRestart on our journey to decide which year of the Switch lifecycle was its very best. But before we get into it, tell us some of your favorite Switch moments from 2017 in the comments below.
Absolutely. We want to goose the algorithm. Comment down below. And also, just at the top, make sure you go to subscribe to Andres. I mean, he's got a much bigger following than we do, but he also does very different stuff, very good stuff. Love his videos, so that's the Andres
very
plug.
Informative. And he is on the quest to reach 50,000,
yes.
Is that correct?
At some point.
Down the road. We're on the quest to reach 300.
One step at a time.
Andres, very happy to have you on here.
Before we get... tell us a little bit about your content for those who don't know.
Yeah. So typically, I don't like to advertise my content. Fine. I'm just like, hey, I exist. But nah, joking aside, I talk about Nintendo. I try to do it on a near daily basis. I would say my channel is a bit of a fusion of a Nintendo news channel and a Nintendo theory channel. So it's basically a speculation channel. We come up with theories about what's coming next. Like I've been theorizing for the last, I don't know how long, that there's going to be an Ocarina of Time remake. You know, I talk about things like that. Well, if there's some sort of leak or news about Switch 2, we're going to analyze that. Maybe I might make an hour-long Metro Prime 4 lore video before hopefully get it revealed in June.
Maybe.
So, you know, it's a few different things like that. I don't know awesome. if I'm teasing new content. I don't know. We'll see. But
exclusive scoop.
That's what it's about.
IGN and GameSpot and all those hacks are gonna be like on the Nintendo Select podcast.
Whoa, hacks!
You know.
Come on now.
But the topic today is Switch 2017. We're not speculating. We are looking back. We are being retrospective and nostalgic, as the title implies.
So I guess a lot of the reason why Tucker and I talked about doing this kind of show in particular was because of the discussion around Switch. I feel like when a year wraps up is very, very tied to the year overall in a way that I think the discussion around other platforms isn't always the same.
Yeah.
Where 2017 to 2018 to 2019, those are three different eras of the Switch, and you can tell through Nintendo's marketing, you can tell through the releases that came out, and you can tell through things like the Direct and fan discussion and speculation. So I guess just to get the episode started, do y'all think that this is the best year of the Switch, all things considered?
2017?
Yeah.
He's thinking about it.
It's I think the ultimate answer is 100% definitively yes, and it's not close. Maybe I should hold back a little bit there.
Maybe this is for a spicy
is
debate. What's your thing? The debate show that you do? Maybe that heated debate.
Heated
debate. Spicy debate. Yeah,
maybe
a heated debate topic.
Maybe. I think the Switch has had some pretty good years. I would argue 2022, 2023, they've had some very well-rounded good years. But when I look at 2017, I mean, the fact of the matter is we got a revolutionary open world Zelda that just blew our minds, right? It took console gaming, the thing that we were so afraid we were going to lose back during the Wii U era. And I think that the perspective really matters here, especially as a Nintendo fan. We were coming off of the Wii U. That when you consider that, it changes.
We were coming off of Wii U 2016.
So
that's very important information to have.
Oh man, I think 2016 the best game was what, Star Fox Zero
Twilight
Princess
Zero
HD.
It was Twilight Princess HD. Just the biggest drought. And there was a shift, in the gaming culture.
Totally.
Overall, when this thing hit the market, I mean, it was really
transformative.
It was transformative, absolutely.
Yeah, and I agree that this is one of the best years. I think the argument can easily be made, and I think that I given the day, I would agree that 2017 is the best year of Switch. I think that it really comes down to quantity and quality. I think there was a very perfect cadence, especially when you look at the internally developed games from Nintendo that were coming out this year. It was every other month that something was hitting. And there was a couple of ports and remakes and stuff like that, but they weren't the vast majority. I think it was really well balanced, really well paced, and we kind of covered all our bases in the way that I don't think many Nintendo consoles feel like they launch in a launch year, particularly like they're covering all of the big stuff. They usually wait a long time, but Switch within that first year, and we're just talking about 2017, so that's really only 8 months. But in those 8 months, we got 3D Mario, Zelda, Splatoon, Mario Kart, JRPGs, Fire Emblem stuff. Yeah,
UIP.
Exactly. It was it's kind of the complete package, and it's all packed into only 8 months of a system.
So this is what I'll say. 2017 delivered a lineup on Switch that surpasses, in my opinion, the entire lineup on Wii U. Like, yes, there were more games on Wii U, obviously, over that course of time. But, like, on the Wii U, as a Nintendo fan, from day one, I was anticipating that big Zelda game, that big Mario game, that big just adventure game. Like, for me, there's a lot of Nintendo games I love. I love Smash. I love Splatoon. Like, I love the multiplayer games as well. But, I fell in love with Nintendo with Mario 64, with Ocarina of Time, with Metroid Prime. What are those games?
Yeah,
they're adventure games. They allow you to dive into this beautiful, immersive world, right? Yeah. And so on the Wii U, we didn't have a lot of that. Yeah. I feel like we didn't get that until Xenoblade X, and that took some years. And then after Xenoblade X, what was it? Nothing. Yeah. Until Breath of the Wild, but at that point, our Wii U's were dead, and most of us were playing it on Switch. And so we had that with Breath of the Wild. We had that with Mario Odyssey. We had that with Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Like, that's 3 games, like, just kind of like that in that first year. But then also we had Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And I know you mentioned how, like, some people maybe don't put too much stock into remasters.
If you're going to put stock into any remaster, it's going to be Mario Kart 8
Put it into Mario Kart 8. Because
the best-selling Nintendo game
ever.
Second,
behind Wii Sports, but yes.
But the best-selling Nintendo game ever that launched individually as its own thing.
But it's not only is it like just like a port from a Wii U game. I don't think that there is any room to argue that this is kind of the definitive version of that game. A, and B, probably the like most worthwhile Mario Kart game to play. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily the best or my favorite, but I do think it is like, if you are looking at every game in the Mario Kart series one by one next to each other, I don't think there's almost any reason why you would pick something over 8 aside from like maybe like the missions
in DS or
some of
Double
the other
Dash
games,
mode.
but
Like there's a few things.
Yeah.
There was neat little things in each Mario Kart game there. Like, oh, I liked that. I liked that. Like in Mario Kart Wii, I loved like the I don't remember if it was weekly, but there was like a semi-occasional like a online event where you play with each other. There'd be some sort of unique boss fighter stage. Like that was cool. Only saw that in Mario Kart Wii. Huh. Yeah, the missions mode in was I think a Mario Kart DS. Yeah. Right, like that was really cool. It was kind of like the closest thing we've ever had to like a story mode in a Mario Kart game, and it was pretty awesome. Or Double Dash, or having double carts. Like there were cool things, but with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, like I think they did a good job of improving upon Mario Kart 8 because one, they did improve the visuals. They fixed the little frame rate issue that the Mario Kart had on Wii U. And when I say they improved the visuals, it wasn't like a vast improvement, but we got 1080p. 1080p, 60 FPS, and that was pretty good. But they actually went back and changed some mechanics. They gave us double items. Yep. And I think that's a big deal, giving us a third tier of drift boost. These little mechanic changes, they changed the gameplay for Mario Kart 8. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. And then also the battle mode.
The battle mode. And like all the new courses in the battle mode are pretty fun. And even the new mode, I think, is like, it's not like
Cops and Robbers
or like crazy new or anything, but I think it's really fun. Yeah. And then you add on top of that like all the Splatoon content, like what is that, Urchin Underpass as this battle location. I think that's awesome. Like I love that kind of thing.
Mario Kart Deluxe, I think, is obviously the definitive version to play that game, but I think it is kind of the high bar for just going above and beyond in re-releasing a game, because if they hadn't added double item boxes, no one would have thought, where's double item boxes? Now, the third level of Sparks, these are things that were added because they were additive and because clearly they'd put a lot of thought into looking back and be like, okay, Mario Kart 8 was a very good game, one of the best games on Wii U, one of the best-selling games on Wii U, but there are areas where we can improve it, and the entire mission mode, that was one of the big things missing. Improving the online a little bit, adding extra characters that were totally unexpected. Like the fact that it's not just the Inklings that then come with the map, but King Boo and Bowser Jr. Like they stepped beyond what they needed to. And then of course this is not within 2017, but related to the game, supporting it down the line with different kinds of updates, and then of course the booster course pass. It becomes it becomes an ever evolving, definitive version of a game. And the way I think a lot of people want repetitive series to do, they're like, why don't we just do like one Call of Duty game that updates every year, or one FIFA game that updates every year? Mario Kart 8 has ostensibly become that for Mario Kart, but because it's a remake, I don't think it gets the credit for, or sorry, like a port or a re-release. It doesn't get the credit for how much stuff they really did add, because they added a lot of stuff in that. And it's obviously the best-selling game on Switch. It's, as Andres was saying, it's the best-selling / second best-selling Nintendo game of all time. It's in the top 5 highest-selling games of all time, and it continues to outsell like new games month on month. It's like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Minecraft, and GTA 5 are 3 of the best-selling games still, and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is by far the newest one of those.
Yeah. Well, I think like this conversation can be extrapolated to a lot of what the Switch does, not just with the Wii U ports, but just its take on what is more or less the Wii U form factor, right? You look at other big games from this year, like Breath of the Wild, which was also on Wii U, right? And it has this kind of like, this is just like the better version of the Wii of what the Wii U did with this thing in just about every way possible, and not just because it's portable, but yes, partially because it's portable. You know, the controller is a little like the controllers are better. The form factor feels
this
more
is
designed.
way better than the gamepad,
and a lot better than the Wii U Pro controller.
Like, and that charge, you know, like. The Wii U gamepad, like maybe
something's wrong with my gamepad because I can't even get an hour out of it. It's so annoying. I sit on the floor with it plugged in to play like Woolly World.
Yeah, I have it duct taped because the battery over the years is just.
Oh really?
It doesn't turn on unless it's plugged in.
Yeah.
The battery's.
So let's go through a couple of the other sort of major games of this year. I mean, we talked about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is obviously sales-wise the biggest, but for me, in terms of mind share, it's the 1-2 punch of Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, 2 of my favorite games, and I would argue some of the best games of all time, that make this like the strongest like launch window lineup that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I mean, you go.
No, go ahead, Andres.
Oh, sure. So yeah, like Breath of the Wild. You know, it won, at the time, it had won more Game of the Year awards than any other game prior. And what's crazy about that is, as you were bringing up Mario Odyssey, had it not been for Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey would have...
It could have. Absolutely it could have, yeah. Which is crazy.
It's insane. They made two goats in the same year.
And I remember, like, the discussion that year. I would, like, have conversations with folks at school and stuff like that, where people would insist that like PUBG was gonna win Game of the Year, and I'm like, no shot. Like, that's a fun game, but it's not Breath of the Wild. Like Breath of the Wild is, I understand the argument for Tears of the Kingdom, but I still think like for my money, Breath of the Wild is the best game ever made. Like it is both this like super original thing while also being very rooted in a lot of the vocabulary that we have from not just other Zelda games, but other open world games and other adventure games in general. And then just kind of like picking and choosing good things about them and then like putting them up to 11, finding the best way to execute that thing as possible. And like Tears of the Kingdom kind of just did that to Breath of the Wild in a way. But I think Breath of the Wild, because of its originality and because of its very distinct take on so many of these things, not just this gameplay loop, but also the world and characters, I feel is just kind of unrivaled. And this isn't me speaking against Mario Odyssey.
Of course.
I think that game is also spectacular.
Well, Breath of the Wild is the big one. I mean, frankly, it is. Yeah. It has, since the 7 years since it came out, become maybe the consensus greatest game of all time. And I know that's not necessarily like 100% true, but it's insane that something like that has bumped into that upper echelon. And I think what can't really be understated about Breath of the Wild, not only is it one of the best games and one of my favorite games, but I think it is the only time that I can really remember in my lifetime the launch game with the system being one of its best. Because frankly, when you look back at the launch lineups of many, many consoles, the devs don't quite know how to use the hardware yet. They're not quite as impressive. You think about PS4 with like Knack and Killzone Shadowfall, or Wii U with New Soup U.
But I feel like that's kind of a recent thing,
yeah.
right? Because I mean, Super Mario World,
in
Combat Evolved,
Mario 64,
Mario 64,
Mario 64.
No, definitely. But in recent memory,
Metal Gear Solid 2,
it doesn't really happen.
Sure, but yeah, recently. I mean,
I love Astro's
I feel like
Playroom. Nothing wrong with Astro's Playroom.
Playroom is like the other best version we have of that. But like, what did the Xbox have?
Serious? Nothing.
The recent
Literally
Xbox
nothing.
have at launch. It had like Tetris Effect and Infinite Memory or something like that.
Yeah.
Or yeah. Anyways.
I would add Wii to the list.
Wii Sports, sure.
Wii Sports,
and also Twilight Princess. They weren't the most technically impressive Wii games. But Wii Sports, from just a motion controller perspective,
sure.
I think it actually kind of, it sold the Wii. Like it was the ultimate demonstration of what the Wii was about for the masses. And Twilight Princess was just an epic game. Also, Excite Truck should not be underestimated.
Don't play Excite Bots.
Excite Truck.
I agree. And what I'm saying is that there aren't great other launch games, but for basically, let's just say the entirety of the 2010s, no system had launched with an amazing system seller game. And frankly, people had been disappointed with almost every system launch in the 2010s. Wii U, 3DS, PS4, Xbox One, all pretty middling to bad launches. And then Switch comes out the gate with maybe the best game of all time, and then Mario Kart 8 Deluxe just 1 month later?
Immediately after.
That is I think that's a big part of the reason why Switch was able to capture mindshare so immediately, because it isn't often in modern times, and I think you can even extend that to PS5, which I think had a very good launch, and Xbox Series, which I don't think had as good of a launch, but was fine, that Switch was able to capture mindshare in a way that many consoles didn't, because it launched with its strongest foot forward, and maybe still to this day, its strongest foot in its entire life cycle, but also it continued putting that foot forward, because the lineup following that was still very strong. We already talked about Mario Kart Deluxe, but you get into the summer.
What about what we're forgetting? One other launch game.
1-2 Switch and Snipperclips, baby.
1-2 Switch, baby.
And Snipperclips.
I think so. Like, sorry to derail where you were going, Tucker, but I feel like 1-2 Switch is a game that we look back on with and we've talked about this in another episode, but 1-2 Switch is a game that gets looked back on as this like kind of throwaway thing. Should have been a pack-in, way too overpriced. But I think it was kind of very instrumental, at least in my experience, because I was the first person in my school to have a Switch, right? And so I brought this game to school, and we were playing it. Just like 1-2 Switch was the game that people wanted to play. They didn't care about Bomberman. They didn't care about Breath of the Wild in that way, because like you can't. I mean, Breath of the Wild is a very fun game to watch, but you can't bring that out at like after school and just be like, "Hey guys, everybody gather around this little handheld screen," right? But 1-2 Switch, I feel like, did a great job of selling people on the actual hardware itself. And while, again, it's
Ball
not
count,
the best tech demo, period. Yes, Ball Count was crazy. Ball Count blew minds. I remember like playing Ball Count at the Smash Club that I ran at my high school, and just like people were like, "Yo, what is going on inside this controller?" Like, just a lot of like very small, very silly things that are, yes, very gimmicky, but also I think instrumental in like convincing people that this is more than just another machine that plays video games. It is a piece of hardware that is fun and
it has
silly,
its own identity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually an interesting point you brought up there, because you bring up 1-2 Switch, and I'm like, I didn't like that game. I really would. I'm actually happy it wasn't a pack-in, because I feel like it would have stained sort of like the overall mystique of the Switch.
Sure.
But to your point,
well, then 1-2 Switch would have been the best-selling game on Switch, though. Imagine if it had been the pack-in.
Oh God!
No. You know what? I'm with Andres.
It actually would have, though.
But, so like, so I stand by that. I stand by that. I don't think it should have been a pack-in, because I don't think it would have been a great representation of the brand overall. Totally. However, you are right in pointing out that like it introduced some very, to a lot of people, right? Like how unique the Joy-Cons were and what they could do, and with the HD Rumble and the balls, as you mentioned, like there were some really cool things that we had not really seen before, or felt before, I should say. And so that was interesting, and I mean, and also Snipperclips, offered a little bit of that as well.
You're absolutely
and we
right,
could even mention Mario Kart in that kind of perspective too, because one, I mean, it was a multiplayer game. You could pull out the Joy-Cons, and I remember being at the airport a few times and be sitting next to my brother like, "Yo, you want to play Mario Kart?" He'd be like, "Yeah."
And,
start playing Mario Kart.
Turn the Joy-Con on its side. There you
could
go.
never do that with any other prior console. It was so ideal. And I'll also mention this: the HD Rumble Mario Kart 8 feels so good. I love drifting in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, in part because it's the HD Rumble. It just feels so satisfying.
Right, man.
Yeah, it's super cool. But something I want to mention before we move on to kind of like the later parts of 2017, even though those parts do matter for this as well. But opening with Breath of the Wild, and when we consider the marketing what we had coming, there was something. It goes back to my point from earlier about how we were coming off of the Wii U. I think there was a little bit of, has Nintendo lost its magic? Can Nintendo still produce, one of the produce some of the best
game
games
of the year
ever?
quality games? Yeah,
and they showed us that they can, that magic, that they still had it. They're like, yeah, we still got it, or we got it in spades. So they came out with a Switch, and the marketing was very fresh compared to what we had been experiencing throughout the Wii and Wii U era, because they were literally targeting their actual demographic, which is 20 to 30s, which they had not done until then, which hopefully now they maintain. I think that the strategy should be, this is what you market to at first, and then as the console ages and you're trying to reach a more expanded audience, then you can start putting out more and more kid-focused commercials. But yeah, they just showed that they actually had the magic. They had the innovation, but they were innovating in the right way. It wasn't like innovation to be wacky. It was innovation to actually make the gameplay experience better. Like, I think they changed gaming forever with the Switch. Now, even when I'm playing games on my PS5, I'm like, oh, man, that was awesome. And then I step away and I'm like, oh, I can't continue it. Like, I'm almost conditioned now because of my Switch that my gaming is so flexible. And so that's something special that they provided with the Switch.
Buy a Portal.
Changed how it changed everything forever. Like, I can't really envision Nintendo not doing some type of hybrid moving forward. Like, anything less than a hybrid would be a downgrade.
Oh, 100%. And I think you talk about like the influence and how it's changed gaming forever. I mean, even beyond the kind of feeling that like, oh, I should be able to play whatever I want portably, the fact that demand has been met so widely and at nearly every single consumer level possible, whether you're playing your Xbox or PlayStation remotely on your phone, or you're playing something on a MSI Claw, Steam Deck, Asus ROG Ally, any of those things
Portal
would not have happened without or the Portal would not have happened without the Nintendo Switch coming out, and not just like killing it, but everybody wanting to play everything on their Switch for so long. And I think, like, talking about like how things have changed since 2017, I think there was so much magic there, right? And I think we've kind of lost some of that because everything is a handheld now. But that magic like really carried through in this like launch lineup. Talking about other like later games in this that came out in this launch year, I think ARMS is a great example of just this like, where did this come from, right? This Mario Kart team is making a fighting game that's like Wii Boxing meets Punch-Out meets like a zoning based arena fighter. It's so wild.
Totally. And I think
I think
it is the Nintendo magic that really dominates this year, because you're right about this year and the Switch making people want to play anything anywhere. But the honest to God truth is the third party support of 2017 was okay, but it was not remarkable. I think it takes until we start getting things like Dark Souls in 2018 and Witcher 3 a couple years later. It's like, feel like, oh, like these are the big things coming to Switch.
But the promise was there,
totally.
Right? Like that was
Skyrim. That's a great point. But really this year in my mind is dominated by the Nintendo games, because they just kept putting them out, and they showed a variety in a range of different titles and new games, new IP, remasters, downloadable titles, party games. It kind of covered the gamut. And ARMS, I think, is, for me, it's not my favorite of the games of this year. In fact, it's not. It's like it's in my top 5, but it's not even. It's not. It is my 5th favorite, because there's so many great games that year that ARMS is a new IP. It looks really good. It uses the hardware.
You're not a Xenoblade fan,
I am a
are you?
Xenoblade fan. Xenoblade 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. That's my 3rd favorite game of this year.
Okay.
What do you want me to tell?
I'm trying to
my top five.
Yeah, let's go through our top fives. Well, actually, let's just do top three aside from Mario and Zelda.
Okay, that's a good point because we're all gonna have Odyssey and
That's
Breath of the
fair
Wild there.
because those are all top two, right? Yeah. So I would say my third favorite, or Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is number 3, right? And so under that, well, man, maybe I should give it to Mario Kart Deluxe. I kind of don't because it's not a new game. Like there's a little bit of that bias there, but I mean, if I think about it in terms of hours played,
it's totally worthy. But again, what I was referring to is I think that stigma is unwarranted because Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is a very different game from Mario Kart 8.
Yeah.
So put it on there.
I'll stick with what I said though. I've played Xenoblade 2 multiple times. Like it's such a good adventure for me, such a fun story, such a fun world.
I see your artwork back there. I see Rex, I see Mithra, I see Pyra.
Yeah.
I see the Aegis.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan. After that, Splatoon 2. I'd put Splatoon 2 is next for me. It was really good. I loved all of it. I haven't played Splatoon 3 as much. Not because it isn't good, just timing. I think hype of the console definitely contributed to things there. But so after that we would have, I don't know, maybe I'll put Snipperclips above ARMS.
That's a great game. That's a good pull.
Yeah,
nothing is that.
Snipperclips is real good.
Yeah. I think I didn't play ARMS as much as I should have.
Yeah, we can always go back, buddy.
But it's still.
We can always go back.
Game.
We have an ARMS night. Let's do it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe
ARMS.
when it's finally made into a Nintendo Select.
Yeah, well, we'll see about that. Hey, namesake of the podcast.
Yeah.
But I actually go basically the exact same as you. When I say that ARMS isn't my favorite, but it's in my top 5. But ARMS is also one of my favorite games of all time. It's because, Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, Xenoblade 2, Splatoon 2, and ARMS. Those are. I mean, for a 5 group of games that for me were some of the most influential and important games for me. Splatoon 2, not the first, but one of the first online multiplayer games I really got into. Xenoblade 2, the first JRPG I really, really dove deep into. And ARMS, just a very special game. We actually, in just a couple weeks, we're going to be doing an ARMS specific episode with the YouTuber A Talking Sock, who is maybe even a bigger ARMS fan than either of us, which we didn't think was possible. But yeah, it's that group of games. Even if we're like, okay, we kind of default Odyssey and Breath of the Wild, but that next 3 lineup, and then you can dip down into Snipperclips, had a lot of fun with Pokken, had a lot of fun with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, like
Fire Emblem Warriors.
Yeah, Mario Rabbids.
Also a game. Mario Rabbids arguably should be higher up in that list. But they had a very, very
Charlie,
good
what are
year.
your other choices?
Yeah, I think my top 5, or my top 3 outside of Odyssey and Breath of the Wild would be Splatoon 2, ARMS, and Mario and Rabbids. I think Mario and Rabbids is that is a game that I think does not get talked about enough as both a really well executed, approachable take on the tactics genre as a whole that's also really challenging towards the end. I remember I played that and I was like, this is not what people were people describe this as baby's first tactics game, and I was struggling back in the day when I first booted that up. I've definitely gotten past that and played the DLC, which is also spectacular, by the way. But yeah, I think Xenoblade 2 is a game I'd like to go back to one of these days. I was super hyped for it, and I just didn't connect with it at all. But I have the controller. It's a great Pro controller. Day one, I was so stoked. That Pro controller is really sick.
We can do a ranking the Switch Pro controllers episode.
That sounds like a very fun episode. And Andres, if we're ever at the same place in person and you have a Smash Ultimate controller, I would trade with you for the Xenoblade one.
I'll make sure to go find one. Yeah, because I wanted the Xenoblade controller, couldn't get it. I wanted the Smash controller, couldn't get it.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. That Smash controller, man, so sick.
Yeah, I would rank the Xenoblade one as
it's really good.
That's a
number one coolest.
Do we want to focus in on any other games? I think that Xenoblade 2 is actually an interesting one to talk about in that.
Yeah, I want to hear y'all talk about Xenoblade 2 because I have a lot of people in my life who are big fans of that game. but I just never.
And it's because you're in what I would call the right circles, Charlie. Because let's be honest, Xenoblade 2 is a contentious game with people overall, which I think is unfortunate because it's a game that means so much to me. But
let me preface. I don't dislike it for the reasons that I think a lot of other people are not super keen on that game for. I just couldn't stand the combat.
Sure.
I know I'm weird.
Yeah.
I was not into the combat compared to the first one.
I know where you're coming from. And Xenoblade 2 is a very interesting case because I think it was really awesome that they were able to get Xenoblade 2 out in 2017. Like, it came in right in December, right? So, fresh off the heels of Mario Odyssey, we get Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which was amazing to me because Xenoblade is like maybe a top 3, top 4 Nintendo franchise for me personally, right? So for me, it's, Zelda, Mario, Metroid, take your pick, and then Xenoblade. So for me, it was like, oh my God, right? But I understand where you're coming from. The combat is actually maybe like the best combat ever.
I know.
But you have to get through many of the learning hurdles.
Yes.
And there's a whole bunch. The game does not tell you how to do it. I took a lot of research and trial and error and practice and hours of gameplay and some frustration. But once you figure it all out, it is magic in motion.
No, I agree with that, and I think,
but that's the problem.
How I feel about the first Xenoblade Chronicles combat is, I think it's just like that. Part of why I like it too is you have that like weird tactility of like smashing your D-pad as you like cycle between abilities and stuff. I don't know why, but that always made me feel like I was more engaged. I think it's just because like clicky button make brain juice flow or something. But yeah, I'm really interested in that game's story too. Like, it seems like it has a very involving story once you get past like the 10-ish hour mark.
Yeah, it's a game that means a lot to me, not only because, as I mentioned earlier, it was really the first JRPG that I got super into, but because I think that it executes on a lot of its own ideas at a very, very high level that I think people don't necessarily give it credit for. I think that the cast of characters is so large, but is so well balanced and paced, and their personalities are so different that by the end of the game, you've got a 12-person party total, and plus all the extra blades that you can get. And I love them all. And they were introduced at the perfect clip, and I love the fact that they show up a little bit before they join your team, and so they feel like, ooh, I don't know which of these characters is going to actually be part of my party at a certain point. And by the point that you have delved into all the different kingdoms of All Rest, and you have learned about the history, and you're in the last acts of the game being revealed about the lore behind all of this that reframes everything. I think that there is a genuine personal connection to the group of characters, even through all their ridiculous tropiness, that shines through and makes the insane final acts of this game feel really just like genuinely heartfelt and emotional. And so when you're getting these sweeping orchestral moments of like grabbing a character and like flying out of an explosion, you're like, this is the greatest experience I ever had in my life. I love these guys. I wanna snuggle up to them and have a big party. Like, this game is absolutely magical to me. And I do agree, Charlie, that the game's biggest weakness, but also in some ways the reason why I was able to get immersed in it so much, is that it doesn't have a slow start. It has a slow entire game's worth of beginning. But I found that being introduced to Rex and him as a salvager, and the Argentum Trade Guild and Gormott, and meeting Nia and meeting Tora, and like these characters, just it was paced so well for me that I was just welcomed into this world, and I learned about it bit by bit. And I absolutely adore that game. I think it's generally phenomenal. And also awesome that, again, you're right. Awesome that they got it in 2017, because everyone saw that trailer like, no shot in hell. You kidding me? You just made Xenoblade X 2 years before. How did they do that? How did they make that game?
They did it by making it in different parts, with different teams, and it was rushed. And I think that does impact the overall game. There were some weird performance graphical issues. Because the different teams made different parts of the game, maybe not everything sort of blended really well, and so that may have impacted some of the tutorial systems in place that made it a little bit harder to kind of sort out how to get into this very deep and gratifying combat system. So Yeah, it had its issues. Now, some of those issues have since been patched. Like, so if there's ever a time to go back to Xenoblade 2, I mean, now's as good as any.
Xenoblade 2 Definitive
the best
Edition
it's going to
coming
be.
in a few years.
After Xenoblade X.
Yeah.
So, maybe another 8 years from now.
Charlie, you can get around it. You can get around to it then. End of Switch 2.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's sooner. Maybe we get a definitive edition sooner. Supposedly we're getting one for Breath of the Wild in 2025, maybe. So,
but yeah, it's a great game.
Yeah. But it's such a good game. Well, I could talk about the DLC and all that, but that would be outside of
2017. So
yeah.
But yeah, I think talking about kind of like getting some of those reveals in where you're like, no shot this is coming out that soon or anything like that, I think is one of the kind of secret strengths of a lot of the directs of that era, right? Like, I don't think all the directs in 2017 were like huge banger directs that I think we've kind of come to expect every like 3 or 4 months, right? But they were very good at kind of like, here is the plan for 2017.
Yeah.
We are going to hit every single thing that we possibly can. And I feel like the directs weren't always hitters, but like there were some like real bangers in that lineup. I mean, that E3 direct, I think, from 2017 is maybe the greatest E3 presentation period. It's up there.
Metroid Prime 4 was announced in this direct.
One day.
Right. And we still haven't seen any footage of the game.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little about that because I think it's important, right? Because it's not a game that came out, but it's a game that was announced, and it was a part of our headspace. It was a part of our excitement of that year, right? And so, I mean, it's interesting because like it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, like, hey, like the going into this generation, there was kind of like this thought, has Nintendo lost its magic, and they have a return to form, and they did that. And then announcing Metroid Prime 4 was kind of them doing that even more so, like, hey, you want a big hype announcement of a really ambitious series that's been dormant for a long time? Here's Metroid Prime 4. And there was so much excitement behind that. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like, the Metroid Prime 4 announcement, like, it's like one of those, like, classic, like, Nintendo excitement reaction things. You go to the Nintendo store and how people reacted to it then, like, it was insane. It sucks that we still haven't seen anything, but hopefully when that time comes, hopefully really soon, it does kind of measure up to that expectation. But like it was part of this allure, this mystique that Nintendo provided for Switch, and it definitely, I mean, it was 2017. To me, it is the high point of the golden era, but it was definitely like the beginning of a golden era of Nintendo.
Yeah, and I think that the balance between, we knew what basically all the games that were coming out in 2017 in January, especially all the big stuff, all the internal Nintendo stuff, a lot of third-party stuff. They showed off Skyrim, they showed off a lot of things in that January presentation, which I would contend content-wise and lineup-wise is the best showcase of all time. It's not one of the best showcases of all time to watch because it was fucking awkward and slow, and there was the mistranslation, and they had people on stage that weren't doing things right. But when you talk about them going back to back to back, 1-2-Switch, Splatoon 2, Mario Odyssey, ARMS, Fire Emblem Warriors, Xenoblade 2, that is a first-party, second-party lineup that is unrivaled. But I think
they also announced SMT5 in that presentation.
I think the real kicker to making me feel, especially in 2017, like I'm going to be passionate and excited about this ecosystem for a while, is because that 2017 E3 Direct announced a lot of stuff back to back in the same way that the January 2017 one did, but it was a thing of,
it trimmed the fat though.
It did trim the fat, yes, of course, because it was a pre-recorded thing.
It was very efficient, and it was also like I think you look at like the pacing of that direct too, like there were major first party reveals like you said, back to back, and it shows like a level of confidence that I don't think we'd seen from Nintendo in a very long time, and like a good confidence, I would say. Like there are definitely moments where they're confident with something, when they're presenting a game in a direct, and it feels confident, but it's not not the right way. Like sometimes they're like, oh, let's focus on this thing for 15 minutes of a 30-minute direct, and it's like, why not just do a separate direct, right? Whereas I think that presentation in particular was exceptionally well paced and cut perfectly just to get the word out that Nintendo's back.
Yeah.
And all of their resources, almost all of their resources, have been shifted to making games for one platform, which had never happened before. And I think this presentation really kind of codifies that as the Nintendo message, right? Is we're here and we're about taking ass and making games, or whatever it is, whatever Reggie said. You know, it's like
kicking ass and taking names.
But we're about
kicking
making
ass,
games.
taking names, and we're about making games.
But he also said in that
really
direct,
there you go.
If the game isn't fun, why bother, or something like that. And then
which is one of the funniest things.
And then he holds up the Switch, and the house
exists,
around him like melts away, and he's like in this field. It's like, what the hell is happening? But that's a fascinating direct, because
were that the fields of Xenoblade 2? Or is it? I don't remember.
No, I think it was just a field, but it was obviously very similar to Xenoblade 2. Because that direct started with Xenoblade 2. If you remember, there was a very long Xenoblade 2 trailer.
Maybe that was the intent.
Yeah. And then they went into Kirby Star Allies, I believe was the second game, and then Tsunekazu Ishihara came out and talked about the fact that not only was Pokken coming to Switch, but that they were developing a home console Pokemon game. We didn't see it. We actually didn't see it until almost a year later, and that was Let's Go. But that announcement...
The confirmation of that was huge, though, because for years we had been hoping and praying that eventually mainline Pokemon games would make it onto console. And with Switch, because it was hybrid, it's like, oh, well, now it is. And what's interesting is that, now the conversation has been that, Pokemon's seen the most success on the Switch than any other prior platform. Because I think we haven't seen the best-selling Pokemon game on Switch, but we've seen the second, third, and fourth. And it's been so consistent almost every other year. So it's pretty impressive what they've done on the console. But just that excitement, that allure of that going to happen.
Totally
really cool.
And it's
also,
very cool.
Sorry to interrupt. I did look back at the E3 spotlight, and yes, when the field was the Xenoblade 2 field.
Awesome. Yeah, but awesome. the other things were, of course, Metro Prime 4. That's just a teaser, and it's still a legendary moment. But I think what is so cool about this direct is it's announcing things at very different time scales. And so even though we are aware of most of 2017's lineup to this point, we get a relatively major 2017 announcement in Mario & Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which had technically been announced the day before at Ubisoft, but it's for the Nintendo audience, so it's whatever. And Kirby Star Allies is 2018. They also announced Yoshi's Crafted World, which is 2019. Technically, we're still waiting on a game from that showcase, but then I think the kicker is like, okay, so we're getting things from all across the life cycle of the Switch, basically. But also they ended it with, in my opinion, one of the best second trailers for a video game of all time, which is the Mario Odyssey Jump Up Superstar trailer that introduces the capture mechanic, and it blows your fucking mind. Everything about this direct, I think, is just paced to okay, you're in the ecosystem. Xenoblade 2 coming this year, because that's when they confirmed that it's still coming in 2017. We have a home console Kirby game, a 2D Kirby game, which hadn't happened since the Wii at that point. Another Yoshi game, which is on in terms of hype level, probably one of the lowest, but Metroid Prime 4, and then Mario Odyssey is not just a really cool sandbox Mario game, but it's a revolutionary sandbox Mario game. And the direct on that, Pauline, October 27th, 2017. I'm genuinely getting goosebumps just talking about it.
Yeah, I think that the Mario Odyssey trailer is just one of those moments, right? I think I certainly remember where I was. That was the day I got my driver's license,
nice.
Which is very funny. But I so vividly remember oh, is this Monster Hunter? What's up with this T-Rex? And then you see the mustache, then you see the hat, and it's come out, and then the music just kicks in, and it's this gauntlet of just colors and new mechanics and enemies and worlds being thrown at you and teasing so much, while also revealing the perfect amount. And I feel like it's one of those trailers that is just so well cut together.
Can you see?
I love what you brought up.
It's
how
strong.
I can't. But I get it. I think it's great you brought up though how like that those first few moments of that trailer were like, oh, is this Monster Hunter?
Yep.
Like I had the exact same thought you did, but then when Mario came out, I was like, oh my god, that's crazy. There's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is just so freaking cool. I mean, something I just want to talk about with Mario Odyssey, like, the Switch graphically, I mean, it's a way more impressive than the Wii U because it's portable.
Sure.
But it's also more powerful than the Wii U and still portable and smaller.
Yeah. Way smaller.
Blows my mind even more so.
Yeah.
But, it was technically only a little bit more powerful, though, right? Yet, despite that, you look at Mario Odyssey versus 3D World, and you're like, whoa, that's a jump. And so, like, Nintendo's done this a few times where they've had a next-gen console that isn't that much more power, but then that next iteration of a particular game series, like, oh, how did they make that jump? Like, I remember the jump from Super Smash Bros. Melee from GameCube to Smash Bros. Brawl on Wii, and I'm like, whoa, where did all these textures come from?
Yeah.
And it's interesting how sometimes the Nintendo dev teams, like, you thought that prior game looked pretty good for that respective console, but somehow they made a pretty significant leap here, even though the hardware is only just a bit more powerful overall. So that was just a neat little thing. Like, I remember when I saw Mario for the first... Well, technically, we saw Mario October 2016, and then we saw him again in the presentation, then at E3. But it was crazy. And actually, what's interesting, this is, I guess, technically 2016, but it's about 2017. Like, when we got that Switch teaser trailer, a lot of people didn't even believe the Mario game was real. Sure.
Yeah,
which blows my mind. Like, I'm still gonna take my victory lap on that one. I'm like, no, guys, everything in this trailer are real games. It's not. They're all real. Like, people didn't even believe the Skyrim thing.
It's interesting. There's actually one game in the 2017 presentation that was never real. Can anyone pull it? There's a game that was shown off in that 2017 presentation that never came out.
The January presentation.
Yes. Steep
I don't know.
For Switch. Steep was shown off in the sizzle reel, and then never came to Switch.
Yeah,
it must have been. But I just thought I'd flex my little bit of trivia, a little bit of knowledge.
There you go. So here's something else that we haven't thought about, or maybe thought about we haven't brought up. Champions Ballad,
sure,
or just the overall expansion pass to Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild came out in March, but throughout the year we got 2 different DLC waves. And they were pretty special. I think I would definitely say that Nintendo's had better expansion passes since Breath of the Wild. But getting to see that format on Switch and Breath of the Wild being the first of it, I think that was definitely a big step. Like, yeah, I know that with Mario Kart 8 they had some waves, but the format that they've used with the expansion pass on Switch, we saw that first with Breath of the Wild, and I mean, it was still good content. I'm still really excited about what they did in Breath of the Wild. I wish they did it for Tears of the Kingdom with the Master Mode, with the Trial of the Sword quest, and then the extra story stuff that we got at the end of the year. Like, that was, and then the motorcycle. Like, those are all cool things that they added to Breath of the Wild throughout the year, which were fun.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting looking at that DLC as this kind of like lineage of DLC in the Switch era, where the Breath of the Wild DLC, I forget which one it was, but it was where you start out at the bottom of like this tower or something like that, and you have like nothing, you have no armor, you have no weapons except for your the trials of the sword, and but you see Nintendo kind of dipping their toes into this not fully roguelike, but like very arcade style design that I think carries on into other later DLC things, where you start with nothing, or your powers are reduced, or something is changed fundamentally to make it this like interesting challenge mode that's more than just New Game Plus or Master Mode on a game. And you look at like the recent Splatoon 3 DLC, where it is a roguelike, the Side Order DLC, which I think is really, really fun and a pretty solid roguelike. It's not the best one, but I think it does a good job of kind of like it's hitting those notes. And I think that you like, again, this Breath of the Wild DLC kind of like hints at that, and it's like, oh, we should maybe like do something that's taking that idea and then putting it up to the next level, right? Because I think that Trial of the Sword was really fun and really cool, but I think having it be a roguelike would have been like next level cool.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Anything else that we have to talk?
There's something else.
He took the words right out of my mouth.
Well, I mentioned the Champions Ballad, which is the final wave of the Breath of the Wild DLC. But we got that final trailer and shadow drop of it. Started getting shadow drops. That's also a cool thing that started happening. But that happened at the Game Awards, and Nintendo was already building up a presence at the Game Awards with Breath of the Wild from beforehand. But we got to see other cool announcements during that time, including the announcement for Bayonetta 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Yes.
Coming to Switch.
Yeah. That was crazy.
I feel like Bayonetta 3, that's another one you look at, you kind of look at with the same lens as Metroid Prime 4, right? Where they announced this thing so far ahead.
Ridiculously so.
And, yeah.
And I think detrimentally so, because I think that if that game had come out 2018, 2019, and they were already ready by that point, I think people cared a lot less about Bayonetta 3 when it was 5 years later the game came out. But it was a very cool announcement, and again showed that Nintendo was willing and excited to be announcing things at a very consistent pace. We were getting things throughout the year, whether or not that was DLC updates, smaller games, big games, new IPs, re-releases. That calendar, I think, was really, really well paced, where you never felt like there was too big of a gap between any one kind of thing. We were getting Wii U ports with Mario Kart 8 and Pokken DX.
I assume Tropical Freeze was announced by that point.
No, that was announced in February.
That was that mini direct,
January, February.
When didn't it come out? February?
No,
2018.
March, or it was April or May or something.
It was
that
May.
would make sense. Okay, so it would have had a very short turnaround. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, they added Funky Kong. It wasn't anything crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing that Retro had done between Tropical Freeze and Metroid Prime Remastered.
Hey, they made some pretty good brisket.
What are you talking about?
That's fair. Brisket is special.
I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was 2016, 2017. I think it was 2017 when the official Retro Studios account posted a big ass picture, prime rib brisket something or other, and it was because they're based in Austin, it's barbecue zone, but
right, and then Metroid Prime, so
but I think it was an April Fool's
7 years ago. Retro Studios has been tweeting about some prime steak. Oh, this is an r/Nintendo Switch. The post has been archived. I can't see it.
But I think that we've kind of talked about this ad nauseum, but I think it's time for Friend Coded, where we bring in a couple takes from the community about whatever topic we're discussing. And in this case, I asked people, what are some of your favorite memories from the Switch's legendary first year? And got a good amount of pretty different replies. I think here's one from Thomas Francesi. He says, a forgotten bit that it felt like every new indie game came. A forgotten bit is that it felt like every new indie game came that year to Switch was special.
Oh, sure.
It was actually kind of tough to get your game on the platform for the first 2 years or so. Then around 2019, they opened the floodgates, and now the eShop is a mess.
Yeah,
which I think is kind of true.
Well, I think what's interesting about those early indie games is because the cadence of new releases was, as we were saying, really good. But I think there was just enough space in between them to where people were wanting their big games and Nintendo games to be supplemented by supplementary experiences. But there really was only a scant handful of indie games that were the options for that. And so when you talk about Snake Pass and Blaster Master Zero and Tumbleseed, and there was this lineup.
Tumbleseed, oh my god, what a blast!
Of 2017 indie games, Graceful Explosion Machine. I was gonna call it Gem because that's these are games that I have very specific memories with. They're not the best indie games, but because they announced or they were released at the perfect time in the Switch's life cycle, where I was hungry for that next thing, I bought Graceful Explosion Machine, which is not a game that I like a lot. It's a very good game, but it's not a game I would have tried otherwise. And so I think that a lot of people get that reverence and memories attached to that particular batch of games because it wasn't everything.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's another one here from Sorrel at SorrelQuest on Twitter. The number of games I would have normally skipped that I just picked up to have something to play other than Zelda made it a really special year for me, and it's left me wondering how many random indies that I would absolutely love are out there. Graceful Explosion Machine, Mr. Shifty are two phenomenal games that I absolutely would have missed if they came out today. Which, I think this feeds very much into what we were just talking about, where the discoverability and curation, although we didn't have a featured page on the eShop at that point, I think was really, really strong.
Yeah. Do you have any memories of those kind of games?
Yeah, I mean, I remember just indie games just being a fun time on Switch because it just, you had, especially for the time, it was a fairly big screen, right? And then the system was portable. But then also, if you want to play the TV, you could, and it was great.
Yeah. I've got...
When did the Shovel Knight version release on Switch? Was that
Shovel Hope and Spectre of Torment were both launch games. But then Treasure Trove was down the line somewhere.
That was June. It was later on, but it was still the launch year.
We do have some. We'll go back and forth. Some from the from our Discord community. My friend Steven says, "What a strong start in general. Some top flight indies, some mainstream ports that are good in theory, but may not have worked in practice, and still 2 or 3 of the best games on the system." And that last bit is really what I continue to think about is that they have about half of my favorite games on this system came out in that year, and actually maybe even more than half. Which just most consoles are lucky if they get one of their best games each year on the system. But Switch somehow, some way started with, depending on your taste, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe more of the best games on the system, graphical showpieces, different genres, and they've maintained their legacy. I mean, even the ones that have gotten direct sequels, which is actually quite a few of them, because 2023 was kind of... 2022 and 2023 were kind of 2017 too. We got sequels to Mario and Rabbids and Splatoon and Breath of the Wild, and we got new Mario Kart stuff. But each of those launch window games, 2017 games, still have something exciting about them, which is really, really cool. Nishquick says 2017 was one of their best years. I slightly prefer 2022 and 2023 though, and then he talks about 2023. But he says, but other games, no, okay, never mind. He just talks about 2023. But yeah, those are the 3 we were talking about earlier in terms of being in contention. But yeah, 2017, as Andres, as you were mentioning, one of the best years.
Yeah, I mean, I like to look at the second half of 2021 all the way to, let's say, the release of Mario Wonder. No, we'll also include Mario RPG. Let's just say the end of 2023. Like, that 2.5-year period... That was like a really strong close to the Switch era, and this year has been why are we still alive at that time? But it's all right. We got 1,000 Year Doors coming out in a couple weeks, a week and a half. So that'll be good. And then that direct in June will be pretty hype. But yeah, I mean there have been some good times on Switch, but 2017, I think it kind of, you look at that year. And it makes sense when we look at the reports of how Nintendo has pushed things back to ensure. Well, there's speculation on these reports, right? But seemingly the most popular sentiment as to why Switch 2 is not coming out by the end of this year is to make sure that the software lineup is as good as it can be, and basically that they want to emulate 2017.
Yes, which is a very good thing to emulate.
Because 2017 wasn't absolutely a big deal. It's not just the fact that they had a lot of good games ready that were high quality. Mm-hmm. It's that all these games were there from the get-go and have been able to continue to be successful ever since. Yeah. As you brought up earlier, both Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart Deluxe have continued to sell really
Mario
well.
Odyssey's best-selling.
They're still selling better than some new games now.
Mario Odyssey, best-selling 3D Mario game. Splatoon 2, best-selling Splatoon game. Xenoblade 2, best-selling Xenoblade game. Like, these games have long life cycles. And especially because it took so long to get sequels to them, people still see the 2017 games as the definitive versions of those on Switch. Like, more people continue to buy Breath of the Wild than they even do Tears of the Kingdom, which is not necessarily a commentary on the quality of either game, but in that Breath of the Wild is the one that people know, because it's just been around for so goddamn long.
It's the face of the Switch.
It totally is.
It is. It's the opener for the Switch, and so it kind of gets me thinking about Switch 2 a little bit more. So, like, I wonder, are they going to have a comparable lineup?
Yeah.
And so, like, it's kind of like how we look at Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Xenoblade 2, Mario Kart Deluxe is like the face of the Switch. What games are going to be the face of Switch 2? And that can help
there's
really
an
stand out
AndresRestart video
apart
topic
from Switch 1.
Hey.
Maybe.
So I think this discussion does make me wonder, do you guys think we'll have a Switch 2 launch year as strong as Switch
I think
1?
Yes, and I think that they have to, not only because it seems like they have been gearing up for that this year, a lot slower, internal delay of a couple months, specifically to make sure that they're supporting that lineup of games, but also because a lot of the teams that have put out big games we haven't heard from in a while. I mean, we were reaching the point where there's a number of Nintendo's internal dev teams that are perfectly on track to have a great cadence. Sure. Get a couple EPD4 games, get a 3D Mario, get a Mario Kart, get an Animal Crossing. That is get a new Pokemon game. That is already, if not maybe not as exciting as Wii U to Switch, a comparable quality and consistency and like big titles. And I think that that's why they're really okay taking this year basically off, it seems, because it's more important to put your strongest foot forward with the launch of a new system, and they know that better than anyone now.
Mm-hmm. So I gotta ask you, Tucker. What you just said, my brain says, "Oh, so he thinks Metroid Prime 4 is coming out next year for Switch 2," but I'm not sure you believe that. You think Metroid Prime 4 is coming out this year?
Sure, let's go with that. Yeah. Sure.
I don't know. You don't seem confident in either
direction. Because when I think about big, strong Nintendo games, I don't think about Metroid Prime.
You take that back.
Hey, just speak my truth.
Listen, I think that if Metroid Prime 4 has a remotely strong multiplayer mode, that is a June game.
This year?
For Switch 2.
Oh,
next year.
Holy shit. I shat my pants.
Yeah. It's coming out in a month.
You shall dropped. Yeah,
although there are rumors, I think, Andres, you might have mentioned this in a recent video that someone recently said that Metroid Prime 4 like marketing is going to be starting up soon.
Yeah, so Jeff Grubb, right, said that he had heard that marketing for Metroid should kick off in May. Now, there's been speculation that maybe that's just the preparation. My thought process is he heard that a long time ago, and plans change. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that's the case anymore. Yeah. But to me, I think it strengthens the argument that Prime 4 is actually a next year thing, although he's heard this year, so maybe it does come out this year, right? But my thinking is if part of the reports are like, hey, Switch 2 is supposed to come out this year, and then also Jeff Grubb was hearing, oh, Prime 4 is supposed to come out this holiday, to me that comes with a strong implication that it'd be a cross-gen, because if Switch 2 comes out October and Prime 4 comes out October, that doesn't... So my thinking is, okay, well, both have been delayed to next year.
Totally possible.
But we don't know. We're going to find out in June.
Absolutely. If it's coming out this year, obviously it has to be.
I mean, the point is, though, maybe Metroid Prime 4 is saved as kind of like a Breath of the Wild thing for Switch 2 early next year, right? But then you also have Pokemon Legends ZA, which can take on a similar role as well. It's still going to sell a lot on Switch, but those are two games that could potentially be cross-gen titles. But you brought up 3D Mario. It's about time for 3D Mario. It's about time. It's more than it's overdue for a new Mario Kart, right? Like, you can get those things. I personally feel like Animal Crossing might be further out, but who knows? There's a number of teams that could be on the ready. I think if you look at kind of the cadence of releases of Monosoft of games, we're bound to get another one in 2025.
And maybe it's the new IP.
This is the break year that we traditionally see after DLC, which we got last year. And so we're getting something from Monosoft next year as well. People have been anticipating something Donkey Kong. That's something else that could fit in there. So, from what I already said, I think that kind of it plugs in similar holes compared to what we had in 2017.
I've got two more comments from the Discord, but do you want to do some Twitter ones?
Yeah, I was going to say I have a bit of a longer one from Evan at Agro Dragro. Aggro Drago on Twitter. I actually remember a lot of these directs actually being received pretty tepidly. In the January showcase, there were concerns over third-party support, really, and outside of Zelda and Mario, there were concerns the first-party lineup wouldn't be enough. A lot of teasers with no gameplay. The E3 presentation didn't actually have much more, with promises of Kirby, Yoshi, and Pokemon pretty far out from what people had been hoping. But the Mario Odyssey trailer killed. I still go back and watch the Giant Bomb reaction to feel alive. And you have to remember up until that point, there had actually been a pretty big gap in first-party releases between Zelda at the start of March and Mario Kart in late April, and then ARMS in June. There was uncertainty if Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was even going to release that year. It wasn't until the second half of the year before the lineup really looked killer when ARMS, Splatoon 2, Fire Emblem, Warriors, Pokken, Mario, and Xenoblade released in quick succession By that point, it was easy to look back in retrospect and not think about the initial gaps, which I think this goes back to the conversation we had about indie games and non-Nintendo games, right? Where you have these other like smaller things kind of having their time to shine in the spotlight. I remember this game Kamiko, which I definitely never would have played if there wasn't a very long like drought of games. But I think it really did allow for this system to become the indie hit that it was, because I think a lot of these indie game success stories of the Switch era have been, and when I say of the Switch era, I mean like every platform, have been like a lot of the time linked to, oh guys, look, I just picked up this really cool game on Switch,
Celeste.
Yes, I mean Celeste, absolutely, and that plus the critical like reception to that game too, I think really kicked Celeste's popularity into orbit.
Yeah, because also a lot of indie games sell best on Switch. Which is really, really cool. And you're right. I think that the comment that was this Aggro Drago guy, what they make about it feeling slow is actually pretty reasonable. Now that I think back to it, I'm like, okay, a month-to-month cadence is totally fine once you've got a gigantic back catalog of games to play, but the Switch did not have backwards compatibility. The Wii U had not had games, big games, for almost a year and a half at that point, and so I don't remember, but I can easily see someone being like, man, I've got to wait 6 weeks to Mario Kart? That's a long time when there's a very small library to play. But hindsight is absolutely 2020 in this, because we look back and like, monthly game from Nintendo, published by Nintendo, is insane. And also, they hit all these metrics that we talk about over the course of this whole episode. But yeah, it does make sense. I mean, I don't agree in terms of I don't remember feeling that way, but it's understandable when you think about it from a in the moment, not necessarily knowing how good all these games are going to be. Because then also you can say like, okay, some people were disappointed by ARMS. A lot of people didn't play Pokken and Fire Emblem Warriors. There's a lot of people didn't play Xenoblade. So then the gap becomes Splatoon to Mario Odyssey, which is like 4 months. So then it's like, okay, that makes a lot more sense.
But at that point, you're just not playing good games.
I agree.
Like, it's like, hey, imagine being on Xbox and be like, man, there's no good games. They just released Halo. And you're like, yeah, there's no good games. Well, why don't you play Halo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like Halo. Then why you have an Xbox?
I got one comment from our new friend on the server, Scruffy, who says, 2017 for the Switch was one that really set the precedent going forward. The fact that the first original Mario game that we got for the Switch was a crossover with Rabbids, and it wasn't completely terrible, is honestly staggering. Across the board, the first year felt exceptionally solid, and I can't think of many gaps in the lineup. Everyone was catered for, and that was a great feeling. Definitely true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I will say, while I was joking, right, like, they focused on variety, so you're likely to get at least a couple games in that year that appeal to you. Mm-hmm. But also, it is the launch year, right? So they're not trying to sell it to everyone in the launch year. They're just trying to get off to a good start, which is what they did. And they started appealing to a larger audience as the library expanded. And so I think that's fine.
All right, well, I think that
just
about wraps up everything.
Oh, it's from Abram. Abram is making his debut as a commenter here on the Nintendo Slide podcast. He says, one of my thoughts on Switch's 2017, they're the same as everyone else's. It was awesome. But I want to zoom out and look at Nintendo's 2017 overall. The 3DS was still kicking this year, and while a ton of software was hit or miss, we did get Samus Returns that September after its surprise Trios reveal at E3 2017. An absolutely banging game, and the final 3DS title I really got excited for. It's interesting to look back at the 3DS 2017 catalog and realize that Nintendo truly wasn't sure as to whether or not the Switch was going to work. You had a new IP from Grezzo and Ever Oasis, revivals like Samus Returns, spin-offs like Hey Pikmin, and sure wins like Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon. Lots of mid-3DS games that year, no doubt, and plenty of frustrations within the community that these games weren't on Switch. Very, very true, especially Mario Party Top 100. But this is a key dimension of 2017 landscape that I think about. 3DS is still a viable platform if the Switch were to flop. Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's funny that Abram brings that up because we were talking a little bit about this exact topic before our recording. Andres, you're a pretty big Metroid fan. Let's hear you talk a little bit about Samus Returns.
Love it. Samus Returns, it was my last 3DS game. Like, I didn't want to be using my 3DS anymore, but Samus Returns had me playing my 3DS, even in 2017. Even though I already had a Switch, it brought me back for that. And, man, it's just such a cool game. I mean, for the 3DS, it definitely kind of pushed it visually. But, like, introducing the melee counter, introducing some of the new content in the game. There's a couple of new boss fights.
Yeah.
It's a very, very, very cool game. And I do remember a lot of people saying, man, this should have come to Switch. And I kind of understand because we didn't get a Metroid game until 2021. So, like, you know, it would have worked out. But the other unfortunate thing is that Samus Returns didn't even sell well.
No.
On 3DS. So, you know, when I think about these things, I wonder if Nintendo will have learned any lessons carrying over into Switch 2. Now, the difference is Switch 2 will be back. We assume, and most times are suggesting it's going to be backwards compatible. So that issue may not really exist as much. But, you know, will there be, you know, more patches and things? Because imagine if the Switch was backwards compatible with 3DS somehow, right? Like, hypothetically speaking. And then on Switch, it had an upscale, you know? That would have been a big deal.
Yeah.
More people would have probably bought it.
Maybe, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think Samus Returns is also interesting as this kind of... You see this game doing what it does and bringing a lot of like new ideas into 2D Metroid, which firstly hadn't gotten a new entry in forever, but
in a very long time.
Operates on a lot of the same kinds of ideas, right? And this really did bring a lot of new stuff to the table, and seeing how that stuff, a lot of those ideas like the parry counter were kind of worked on and sharpened into something really, really cool for Metroid Dread in a way that I think something like the parry counter like slowed things down and didn't work as well in Samus Returns, it becomes again this like polished, sharpened thing that works so well, and it feels so good to execute on in Metroid Dread.
Yeah. Something else I'll mention is that Mercury Steam, the developer for both Samus Returns and Metroid Dread, there was a concern about the quality of Samus Returns, and also about there was a concern for the quality in Dread because that was a new game with more ambition. Samus Returns was technically just a remake, right? Before that, Mercury Steam was responsible for a not so good Castlevania game in a similar style. And I remember seeing that game and being excited about it, but when I saw reviews, I was like, oh, okay, this wasn't like, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great, you know? But I think it kind of showed that, you know, when Nintendo steps in and helps to kind of balance out a dev and guide them, you get some magic. And so Samus Returns was very good, and then they learned with that, and then they got better, and they worked with Yoshio Sakamoto on Metroid Dread, and that, you know, Metroid Dread is, I think it, for me, it's safe to say is definitely a top 10 Switch game. It's,
I'm with you.
It's that good. I mean, 2021, I think it's kind of hard to not argue it's the best game that came out that year for Nintendo, right? So, like, yeah, I mean, it's a very, very good game. And it kind of shows that Nintendo, you know, can build partnerships like this. And so hopefully they continue to be like the 2D developer just moving forward for Metroid. But Samus Returns was kind of the start of that. And it is interesting that that's another high-quality Nintendo game that came out during this bevy of killer titles for Switch.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up just about everything there is to discuss in this episode up. Before we go, Andres, can you tell the good people where they can find you and your work?
Sure. Yeah. AndresRestart. AndRes.
Restart.
That's my first name. And Restart. RESTART. Yeah.
And
that's my name.
Please go check out his channel. Please subscribe. I seriously, like, Andres, I've been watching you for, I want to say, about a year now, and I really love your content and the way that you cover the Switch Nintendo leak rumor cycle. I think is not just fun. I think it's very measured and very confident, but never kind of over-promising or misguiding people, which I think sometimes does happen in some of these discussions. I think you do a great job of it, man.
Thanks. Yeah, I try. It's not easy. We get excited, things come up,
That's what Hopium Maximum is for,
I try to balance it out. Well, yeah, I was happy like I came up with that idea because it's like a great way to make it really clear. Hey, listen, I'm not trying to tell you this is 100% happening. It's an idea that I think is worth discussing. It's about the discussion and the possibilities, and we'll see what happens.
Totally.
Right. It's not reading the review for the review score. It's reading the review for the review itself.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
all right. And
Charlie,
Tucker, you want to plug yourself?
I've been putting a lot of work into backlog banter videos lately. Not only have we been doing this podcast weekly, which has doubled the amount of videos that we usually put up, but I put up another one of my big projects the other day, yesterday, as of recording, which is a comprehensive breakdown, scripted and edited video, the first one of those on our channel, of every Nintendo internal team. So we talk about what EPD1, EPD2, EPD3, all the way to 10, and then some bonus teams as well. What they do, what their history is, and what we think that they'll be working on in the future. And we've got a couple more for those still... a couple more big projects. They're not scripted and edited videos. That took me like a month and a half to make, so I cannot do those all the time. But for those listening to the end of this podcast, if you want to look at what's coming in the next couple weeks, we have a Nintendo Switch Summer Vibes playlist, like to chill, study to kind of thing. I'll do the full reveal here, the formal reveal of the Ochi gift that we got an Ochi gift made for us.
Oh, that's so
this
cute.
is totally original art by Crispy Boat on Twitter. That's going to be playing during the music. And also, I edited together every single Nintendo Switch era direct reaction into one mega video. And that's going to be going up as one gigantic fucking video soon.
Roller coaster of emotion.
So there's a lot of big, cool stuff that we've been working on.
Very cool.
Hell yeah. And like, seriously, you guys, go watch this Nintendo Studios video. It does a really good job of breaking down and kind of parsing out who works on what, who supports who, where these teams came from. And like, for me, as someone who's like, again, very involved in like the Switch rumor cycle stuff, very interested in that kind of thing, and as a journalist who covers this stuff like professionally, I think it does a very good job and is very informative in terms of like breaking that kind of thing down. So please check that out. And then for me, you can find my work all over the internet. I am at CHAS_MKE on just about every social media there is. And on top of that, I have some big reviews coming up. I think around when this episode of this podcast comes out, I'll be working on Game Informer's review of X Defiant. I also have a very big review for IGN coming up pretty soon. I don't know if I can reveal what that is just yet because I don't know if my editors are cool with that.
Let's be careful.
Yeah.
it's a big one. It's a big one, and it's one that's already. It's a big one. It's a big one, and it's not what you guys think it is. But so please stay tuned for that stuff. It really means a lot if you can come and help support my work because I pay my bill. I pay my bills with the freelance work, so please read my reviews.
Awesome.
Well, We did it. Well, that is Nintendo Select episode 3 under our 4. We recorded another one that hasn't gone up yet. I keep forgetting. Well, thank you for joining us, Andres. Everyone go subscribe to him. Go read Charlie's reviews. Give him money to pay his bills. Go watch my thing, which doesn't give me money but gives me joy. And we will see you guys next week. We've got more big guests planned, and the podcast keeps chugging along. Thank you very much for watching.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks, y'all.
See ya.